2 days early. I expected a quiet house. Instead, I found a rave in my living room and a tomb on the second floor. My son Bradley was popping champagne downstairs, while my paralyzed wife Catherine lay in her own waste upstairs begging for water with cracked, bleeding lips. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I simply walked past the party, made one phone call, and began the process of erasing my son from my will, my bank accounts, and my life. But before I tell you how I legally destroyed the people who left my wife to rot, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that betraying your parents is the one sin that can never be forgiven. The taxi tires crunched on the gravel of my driveway at exactly 2:14 in the morning. I remember the time because I looked at my watch, calculating how long it would take to get inside and check on Catherine without waking the nurse. But as I stepped out into the humid Florida night, the calculation changed. The bass was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't just noise. It was a physical vibration rattling the hurricane-proof windows of the house I had paid off 3 decades ago. I stood there by the taxi, my carry-on bag gripping my hand, staring at my own front door. A stranger was vomiting in my prize rose bushes. 2 young women I had never seen before were sitting on the hood of my vintage Lincoln, laughing as their heels scratched the paint. The air smelled of cheap marijuana and spilled vodka. This was not the home I had left 5 days ago. I had traveled to Europe to liquidate some old assets, a final push to secure the best possible 24-hour care for Catherine. I had left my son Bradley in charge. I paid the driver and walked toward the front door. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I moved with the same cold precision that had served me well as a logistics CEO for 40 years. I stepped over a red plastic cup crushed into the walkway. I bypassed the vomiting stranger without a glance. I pushed open the front door, and the wall of sound was deafening. My living room, the sanctuary where Catherine and I used to read by the fire, was unrecognizable. There were at least 50 people inside. The furniture was pushed against the walls. My Persian rug, a gift from a business partner in Tehran 20 years ago, was stained with dark, sticky puddles. But it wasn't the property damage that made my blood run cold. It was the realization of time. To organize a party of this magnitude, to destroy a home this thoroughly takes time. This wasn't a spontaneous gathering. This was a takeover. I scanned the room for Bradley or his wife Megan. I didn't see them. I saw a man doing lines of white powder off my dining table. I saw a couple making out on the sofa where Catherine used to sit before the stroke took her mobility. I felt a tap on my shoulder. A young man barely 20 with glazed eyes and a beer in his hand grinned at me. "Who are you, Grandpa?" "The nursing home is down the street." I didn't answer. I didn't blink. I simply sidestepped him and headed for the stairs. My internal alarm was ringing so loud it drowned out the music. If this was happening downstairs, what was happening upstairs? I climbed the steps, my hand sliding up the banister. It felt sticky. The hallway on the second floor was darker, the music slightly muffled, but still thumping through the floorboards. I walked past my office. The door was closed. I walked past the guest room. I stopped in front of the master bedroom. Catherine's room. I reached for the handle. It was locked. Why was it locked? This was a room for a woman who could not move the left side of her body. A woman who could not speak more than guttural sounds. A woman who needed checking every 2 hours. Why was the door locked from the outside? I rattled the handle. Locked tight. I didn't hesitate. I stepped back and kicked the door right next to the lock. I am 71 years old, but adrenaline is a powerful fuel. The wood splintered on the second kick. The door swung open. The smell hit me before the sight. It was a thick, heavy stench of ammonia, concentrated urine, and something sweet and rotting. It was the smell of neglect. I fumbled for the light switch. The overhead chandelier flickered on. The room was hot. Stiflingly hot. The air conditioning vent had been taped shut with duct tape, and there, in the center of the king-sized bed, was my wife. Catherine was curled into a fetal position on the far side of the mattress. Her beautiful silver hair was matted with sweat and grime. Her nightgown was hiked up, revealing legs that looked like sticks wrapped in parchment paper. "Catherine," I whispered. I rushed to the bedside. Her eyes were open, but they were rolled back, staring at the ceiling with a glassy, unseeing terror. Her lips were cracked open, bleeding fissures running deep into the tissue. I touched her arm. Her skin didn't bounce back. It stayed tented, a sign of severe life-threatening dehydration. She was burning up. I looked at the bedside table. There was a glass of water there. It was full. But it was placed on the far corner of the nightstand, at least 3 feet away from her functioning right hand. It had been placed there tauntingly or carelessly, completely out of reach. Dust had settled on the surface of the water. She hadn't drunk in days. I fell to my knees beside her. "Catherine, it's me. It's Gerald. I'm here." She made a sound, a dry, rasping rattle from her throat. Her good hand twitched, reaching out blindly. I grabbed it. Her fingers were like ice despite the heat of the room. Panic threatened to choke me, but I shoved it down. Panic kills. Action saves. I checked her airway. Clear. I checked her pulse. Thready, rapid, weak. She was in hypovolemic shock. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My fingers were steady as I dialed 911. "What is your emergency? I need an ambulance immediately." 412. Oakwood Drive. 70-year-old female. Severe dehydration. Possible sepsis. Unresponsive but breathing. Is there a danger at the scene? "Yes," I said, looking at the bruise forming on Catherine's wrist. A bruise that looked remarkably like a fingerprint. "There is a predator in the house." I hung up. I didn't run to the bathroom to get water. If her swallowing reflex was gone, water could choke her. I found a sponge on the medical cart Megan kept in the corner. It was bone dry. I poured a little water from the dusty glass onto it and gently dabbed Catherine's cracked lips. She tried to suck on the sponge, a desperate animalistic reflex. Tears blurred my vision. My sophisticated, brilliant wife reduced to this. I heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. Heavy, stumbling footsteps. The door I had kicked in banged against the wall. "Dad!" I turned slowly. Bradley stood in the doorway. He was wearing a silk shirt unbuttoned to his navel, sweat glistening on his chest. His pupils were dilated. He swayed slightly, holding the doorframe for support. Behind him was Megan, my daughter-in-law, the registered nurse. The woman I paid $8,000 a month to manage Catherine's care because I didn't trust strangers. She was wearing a sequined dress that I recognized. It belonged to Catherine. It was a dress from the 80s, vintage and expensive. She had raided my wife's closet. "What the hell are you doing here?" Bradley slurred, blinking rapidly. "You weren't supposed to be back until Thursday." I didn't stand up. I stayed kneeling beside Catherine, holding her hand. I looked at my son. I looked at the man I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had bailed out of debt 3 times, the man I had loved more than my own life. And I saw nothing. No soul, no panic, just annoyance. "Mom is sleeping," Bradley said, waving a hand dismissively. "Why did you break the door? You're going to pay for that." "She is not sleeping, Bradley," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Low, metallic. "She is dying." Megan pushed past him, stumbling on her high heels. "Oh, stop being dramatic, Gerald." She rolled her eyes. "I gave her water just a few hours ago. She probably just spilled it. You know how she gets. She's clumsy. She makes a mess on purpose to get attention." I looked at the water glass. The dust on the surface told a different story. I looked at the bed sheets. They were stained yellow and brown. The stains were dry. A few hours ago, I asked. Yes, Megan snapped. God, you ruin everything. We were just having a little get-together to celebrate Bradley's new business venture. We didn't want to disturb her, so we closed the door. You locked the door, I corrected. Safety precaution, Bradley said, stepping into the room. So she doesn't wander. She can't walk, Bradley. She is paralyzed. He shrugged. She crawls. Look, Dad, you're tired. You're jet-lagged. Go to a hotel. We'll clean this up. Mom is fine. He reached out to grab my shoulder to pull me away from Catherine. Don't touch me. The command came out like a gunshot. Bradley flinched, pulling his hand back. I stood up then. I am 6'2". I have shrunk a little with age, but I still towered over my son. I looked him in the eye, and for the first time in his life he looked afraid. Not ashamed. Afraid. I pointed to the corner of the room up near the ceiling. What happened to the camera, Bradley? There was a small security camera mounted there. I had installed it 6 months ago, not because I didn't trust them, but so I could check on Catherine when I was at the grocery store. A piece of black electrical tape was pasted over the lens. Megan crossed her arms. I covered it. I need privacy when I'm changing her. I'm a professional, Gerald. I don't need you spying on me like some creep. You haven't changed her in days, I said. The bed sores on her hips will prove that. The chemical burns from the urine will prove that. And the blood test that the hospital is going to run in about 20 minutes will prove exactly how long she has gone without fluids. Hospital Bradley's face went pale. No. No hospital. Dad, listen. If you call an ambulance, they're going to ask questions. They're going to think we abused her. You did abuse her. No, we didn't. It's just a misunderstanding. If the police come, it's going to look bad for you too, Dad. You're the primary caregiver. You left her. You went to Europe. They'll say you abandoned her. I stared at him. He was threatening me. My wife was lying unconscious on the bed, and his first instinct was blackmail. Let them come, I said. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The music downstairs cut off abruptly. The partygoers were fleeing. Bradley ran to the window. The lights of the ambulance were flashing against the trees. You old fool, he hissed. He turned to me, his face twisting into a mask of pure ugliness. You just destroyed this family. The family was destroyed the moment you decided my wife was an inconvenience, I said. Megan grabbed Bradley's arm. Brad, stop. We need to get our story straight. Right now. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't drunk anymore. She was calculating. Listen to me, Gerald. I am a nurse. I know how to chart. I have documentation downstairs that says she was refusing fluids. I have notes that say she was being combative. If you push this, I will testify that you were the one who instructed us to withhold care. I will say you wanted her dead to marry a younger woman. Who are they going to believe, the grieving son and the registered nurse, or the husband who flew to Paris while his wife was sick? I looked at her. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with laziness or incompetence. I was dealing with malice. This wasn't an accident. This was a slow-motion murder. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I knew that arguing with a liar only gives them time to refine their lies. Get out of my way, I said. The paramedics rushed up the stairs carrying the stretcher and the trauma bag. They pushed past Bradley and Megan as if they were furniture. Sir. What's the situation? The lead paramedic asked, kneeling beside Catherine. I found her like this 10 minutes ago, I said clearly. I have been away for 5 days. My son and his wife were the sole caregivers. She is unresponsive. The paramedic checked Catherine's vitals. His face tightened. We need to go, now. Her BP is 60/40. She's crashing. They lifted her onto the stretcher. Her head lolled to the side, limp. As they hurried her out of the room, I followed close behind. Bradley tried to block my path in the hallway. Dad, wait. I can explain. I stopped. I leaned in close to his ear, smelling the stale champagne on his breath. You have nothing to explain to me, Bradley. But you will have a lot to explain to the district attorney. I walked past him down the stairs through the wreckage of my living room and out into the night. I climbed into the back of the ambulance just as the doors slammed shut. As we sped away, I held Catherine's hand. I looked at the paramedic working frantically to find a vein in her dehydrated arm. Is she going to make it? I asked. The paramedic looked at me. He didn't lie. I don't know, sir. This is severe neglect. I closed my eyes. The image of the taped-over camera burned in my mind. The image of the water glass just out of reach. I didn't cry. The time for crying was over. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was a sensation I hadn't felt since my days in the boardroom during a hostile takeover. It was the feeling of absolute clarity. They thought I was just a tired old man. They thought I would be scared of their threats. They thought they could kill Catherine, and I would just fade away. They were wrong. I wasn't just going to save my wife. I was going to dismantle their lives brick by brick, dollar by dollar. And I was going to start the moment we reached the hospital. The ambulance arrived at Mercy General's emergency bay in 6 minutes. I watched them wheel Catherine into Trauma Room 1. I wasn't allowed to follow. I sat in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The plastic chair was hard. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I didn't call my son. I didn't call my friends. I called Leonard Katz. Leonard is the kind of lawyer you hire when you don't want a settlement. You hire Leonard when you want to salt the earth. It was 3 a.m. He answered on the second ring. Gerald, is everything all right? No, Leonard. I need you to meet me at Mercy General. Bring a notary. And Leonard. Yes. Bring the file on the irrevocable trust. The one we set up 5 years ago. It's time to activate the morality clause. Leonard was silent for a second. Bradley, he asked. I looked at the doors of the trauma room. Bradley is dead to me, I said. I just need to make it official. I hung up the phone and waited for the doctor. The war had begun. 40 minutes later, a young doctor with tired eyes came out. He looked for me. Mr. Thompson. I stood up. Yes. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Your wife is stable for now. We have her on IV fluids and broad-spectrum antibiotics. But I need to be honest with you. Please. Her sodium levels are critical. Her kidneys are shutting down. She has stage 3 decubitus ulcers on her sacrum and heels. Those don't happen overnight. And Mr. Thompson, we found high levels of sedative in her blood. Benzodiazepines. I froze. Catherine wasn't prescribed sedatives. They interacted dangerously with her stroke medication. She doesn't take sedatives, I said. The doctor nodded grimly. I suspected as much. Someone was drugging her, likely to keep her quiet, to keep her from asking for water. We are required by law to report this to Adult Protective Services. I looked the doctor in the eye. Do it, I said. And doctor, I want a full toxicology screen. I want every bruise photographed and documented. I want a paper trail that leads straight to hell. The doctor looked surprised by my intensity, but he nodded. We will do everything necessary. Just then, the automatic doors of the ER slid open. Bradley and Megan walked in. They had changed clothes. Bradley was wearing a polo shirt and slacks. Megan was in scrubs trying to look the part of the concerned professional. They spotted me and rushed over, putting on their best masks of concern. Dad, how is she? Is she okay? Bradley asked, loud enough for the nurses to hear. I looked at them. I saw the monsters beneath the skin. I decided then and there to play their game. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight. Not yet. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they had gotten away with it. I slumped my shoulders. I let my face fall into an expression of exhaustion and defeat. "She's alive," I whispered. "But the doctor says she's very confused. She might not make it." I saw the flash of relief in Megan's eyes. It was quick, but it was there. "Oh, thank God she's alive," Megan said, hugging me. I stiffened but didn't push her away. "We were so worried. We came as soon as we could." "I'm just so tired," I said, making my voice tremble. "I don't know what to do. Maybe you were right, Bradley. Maybe I can't handle her anymore." Bradley put a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. We're here. We'll take care of everything. You just rest." I looked down at the floor to hide the cold rage in my eyes. "Yes, son," I said. "You take care of everything." And in my head, I started the countdown. They had 48 hours before their world collapsed. But first I had to go back to the house. I had to see what else they were hiding. "I'm going home to get some sleep," I told them. "Call me if anything changes." "Go," Dad Bradley said. "We'll stay with Mom." I walked out of the hospital. I didn't go home to sleep. I went home to hunt. When I stepped back into my house, the silence was heavy. The party mess was still there. I walked through the debris of my life. I went straight to my study. I checked the wall safe behind the painting. It was locked, but there were deep scratches around the dial. Someone had tried to drill it. I turned to my computer. Bradley thought I was a technophobe because I preferred reading physical newspapers. He didn't know I had installed a keystroke logger on the home network 3 years ago after a minor security breach at my old company. I logged in. I pulled up the smart home history. Entry log master bedroom. Monday, no entry. Tuesday, no entry. Wednesday, no entry. They hadn't entered her room for 3 days. Then I checked the GPS history of the family car, which was linked to my account. Monday through Wednesday, Miami Beach. The Ritz-Carlton. They hadn't been home. They had locked my paralyzed wife in a room, taped the vents, drugged her so she wouldn't scream, and gone to Miami to party. They came back tonight only because the neighbors complained about the noise from the house party they threw the moment they returned. I sat back in my chair. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't negligence. It was torture. My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank. Transaction declined, Mercy General Hospital. Amount $500. Insufficient funds. I frowned. That account had over $200,000 in it. It was the emergency medical fund. I logged into my bank app. Balance $14.50. I scrolled through the transaction history. A series of transfers all done in the last 48 hours. All transferred to a crypto exchange account. I realized then why Bradley was so desperate to act the loving son at the hospital. He wasn't just hiding abuse. He was hiding theft. He had cleaned me out. I put the phone down. I looked at the empty safe. I looked at the scratch marks. They wanted a war. They had one. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. Tomorrow I would visit the bank. Then I would visit the police. But first I had a meeting with Leonard. I touched the pocket where I kept my pen. It was a Mont Blanc, a gift from Catherine. I was going to sign their warrant. Not with a gun, but with a pen. The sun was just starting to rise over Florida, painting the sky in blood red. It was fitting. I am Gerald Thompson, and I am about to show my son that the man who built an empire doesn't crumble because of a few traitors. He rebuilds, and he buries the rubble. The fluorescent lights of the Mercy General emergency room hummed with a frequency that seemed designed to induce migraines. I sat in a plastic chair that dug into my spine, my eyes fixed on the double doors where they had taken Catherine. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness. Every second that passed was a second my wife fought a battle she should never have had to fight. Bradley and Megan sat across from me. They had positioned themselves under a vent, perhaps hoping the cold air would sober them up completely. Bradley had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking, in a rhythm that suggested weeping. But when he looked up to check if anyone was watching, his eyes were dry. It was a performance. A rehearsal for the funeral he was undoubtedly already planning. Megan was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving rapidly. She was likely deleting photos from the party, scrubbing her social media, erasing the evidence of their joy while my wife lay dying. I did not speak to them. I did not look at them. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the cold metal of my phone. I pressed the record button on the voice memo app. I did not take the phone out. I simply let it sit there, a silent witness in the darkness of my pocket. The double doors swung open. A doctor stepped out. He looked exhausted, his scrubs wrinkled, a stethoscope hanging loosely around his neck. This was Dr. Vance, the trauma specialist. He scanned the waiting room, his expression grim. He spotted us and walked over, his steps heavy. "Mr. Thompson," he said. His voice was flat, professional, but underneath it I heard the tightness of controlled anger. I stood up immediately. Bradley jumped up a second later, rushing to stand in front of me, blocking my path to the doctor. "Doctor, how is she? Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay." Bradley's voice cracked. It was a perfect pitch of desperate filial piety. Dr. Vance didn't look at Bradley. He looked at me. He saw the man standing silently in the back, the man who had called 911. "She is critical," the doctor said. "We have stabilized her heart rate, but her blood work just came back from the lab. The results are disturbing." "Disturbing?" Megan asked, stepping up beside Bradley. She put a hand on her husband's back, playing the supportive wife. "What do you mean?" The doctor flipped open a metal chart. "Her sodium levels are 170. Normal is 135 to 145. Levels this high are not just dehydration. They indicate she has not had a drop of fluid in at least 72 hours. Her blood has thickened to the point where her heart is struggling to pump it. Her kidneys are in acute failure. Her creatinine is through the roof." He paused, letting the numbers hang in the air like an accusation. 72 hours, the doctor repeated, looking directly at Bradley. "That is 3 days. 3 days without water in a climate-controlled house." "How does that happen?" Bradley let out a strangled sob. He grabbed Megan's hand. "Oh God, she must have been refusing to drink. We tried, doctor. We tried so hard. She just kept spitting it out. She gets confused. She thinks we're trying to poison her. It's the dementia." I stood like a statue. My phone recorded every lie. Catherine did not have dementia. She had a stroke. Her mind was sharp as a tack, trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey her. She would never refuse water. She loved water. She used to drink 3 liters a day before the stroke. Megan nodded vigorously, her eyes widening in feigned innocence. "Yes, exactly. I'm a nurse doctor. I tried to use a syringe to get fluids into her, but she clamped her mouth shut. I didn't want to force her. I didn't want to choke her. We thought she was just having a bad day. We didn't realize it was this severe." The doctor narrowed his eyes. "You are a nurse, yes," Megan said. "Then you should know that skin turgor like hers doesn't happen in a day. You should know that her urine output would have been 0. Did you not check her catheter?" Megan faltered. She blinked. "Well, I changed it yesterday." "There was urine then." "That is medically impossible," Dr. Vance said coldly. "Her bladder is empty and has been for some time. There are crystallizations in the catheter tube that suggest it hasn't been changed in a week." Silence descended on the group. Bradley looked at Megan. Megan looked at the floor. But that is not my primary concern. Dr. Vance continued. His voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerous. He turned the page of the chart. While we were inserting the IV lines, we noticed bruising. Extensive bruising. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stepped forward, pushing past Bradley. Where, I asked. The doctor looked at me. On her upper arms, and on her wrists. They are wraparound bruises, the kind that occur when someone is restrained, or held down with significant force. Bradley's face drained of color. He looked like a ghost. Restrained, he squeaked. We never restrained her. Why would we? She can't move. That is the question, isn't it? Dr. Vance said. Why would you need to restrain a paralyzed woman unless she was trying to crawl to get water? Unless she was trying to escape? I closed my eyes. The image flashed in my mind. Catherine, thirsty, desperate, dragging her useless body across the sheets, reaching for the glass they had placed just out of reach. And Bradley or Megan grabbing her by the arms, forcing her back down, pinning her to the mattress while she tried to scream. Maybe she did it to herself, Megan blurted out. She has spasms, violent spasms. She hits her arms against the bed rails. Bed rails don't leave thumbprints, the doctor said. He closed the chart with a snap. I am ordering a full skeletal survey. I want to see if there are any old fractures, and I have already contacted the hospital social worker. This case has been flagged as potential elder abuse. No, Bradley shouted. He realized too late that he was too loud. He lowered his voice. No, please. You don't understand. My father, he's been away. He left us with her. It was too much. We did our best. If anyone is responsible, it's him. He abandoned her. He pointed a shaking finger at me. The doctor looked at me. I met his gaze. I did not defend myself. I did not argue. I knew that in this moment silence was my most powerful weapon. If I argued, it would look like a family squabble. If I stayed silent, I looked like a man in shock, processing the horror. I want to see her, I said. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. One visitor at a time. The police will be here shortly to take statements. I walked toward the double doors. Bradley grabbed my arm. His grip was wet and trembling. Dad, don't go in there. Don't listen to them. They're trying to cover their own asses. We need to stick together. If you talk to the police, tell them she was sick before you left. Tell them she was already dehydrated. Please. For the family. I looked at his hand on my arm. I looked at his face, sweaty and desperate. I gently removed his hand from my sleeve. I dusted off the fabric where he had touched me. I am going to see my wife, Bradley. You should call a lawyer. I walked through the doors, leaving him standing in the hallway. The air inside the trauma unit was cold. Machines beeped in a rhythmic mechanical chorus. I found bed 3. Catherine looked small. Wires and tubes snaked out from under the thin hospital sheet. Her face was pale, almost gray. Her lips were coated in a thick layer of medical ointment. Her eyes were closed. I stood by the bedside. I looked at her wrists. The doctor was right. The bruises were dark purple, almost black. They were the shape of fingers. Large fingers. Male fingers. Bradley had held her down. I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I named it Evidence 1. I leaned down and kissed Catherine's forehead. Her skin was cool now, the fluids doing their work. I promise you, I whispered, they will never touch you again. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. I watched the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. It was the only sound in the world. Outside in the hallway, I could hear Bradley arguing with Megan. Their voices were muffled, but the tone of panic was unmistakable. They were unraveling. I checked my watch. It was 4:15 a.m. The banks would open in 4 hours or so. The courthouse would open in 5. I had a lot of work to do. But first, I needed the police to arrive. I needed them to see the bruises. I needed them to hear the lies Bradley was spinning in the waiting room. I took out my phone again. I opened my banking app. I needed to see the damage. I needed to know exactly how much they had stolen while I was in the air over the Atlantic. The screen loaded. I stared at the numbers. The anger I felt wasn't hot anymore. It had frozen into something solid, something heavy and sharp. They hadn't just neglected her. They had tried to erase us. I looked at Catherine's face. Rest my love, I thought. The CEO is back in charge, and heads are about to roll. The doctor retreated behind the double doors, leaving a silence in the waiting room that felt heavier than the humid Florida air outside. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the vending machine in the corner and the distant rhythmic squeak of a nurse's shoes on linoleum. I sat staring at my hands. They were steady. My mind was racing at the speed of a high-frequency trading algorithm, but my body remained perfectly still. I knew what was coming next. The predator had been cornered, and now he would lash out. Bradley moved first. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply slid into the plastic chair next to mine. He sat too close. His knee pressed against my leg. It was an invasion of space designed to dominate. I could smell the stale alcohol sweating out of his pores, masked by a layer of cheap mint gum. He leaned in until his lips were inches from my ear. You need to listen to me very carefully, Dad, because your life depends on the next 5 minutes. I turned my head slowly to look at him. His eyes were hard. The dilated pupils from the party drugs had constricted, leaving behind a cold, flat stare that I did not recognize. This was not the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. This was a man who had calculated the value of my wife's life and found it wanting. You are going to tell the police that Mom was sick before you left. You are going to tell them that you hired a private nurse who didn't show up. You are going to tell them that this is all a terrible administrative error. And if I don't? I asked softly. Bradley smiled. It was a terrifying expression devoid of any warmth. If you don't, then I tell them the truth about you. Or rather, the truth I will create. I will tell them about your memory lapses. I will tell them how you leave the stove on, how you get lost driving to the grocery store, how you sometimes forget who Mom is. I don't do any of those things I said. It doesn't matter what you do, Bradley whispered. It matters what we can prove. Megan is a registered nurse. Her word against yours. She has already started the documentation, Dad. She has charts dating back 6 months detailing your cognitive decline. She has notes about your aggression, about your paranoia. Megan stepped closer, looming over me. Her arms were crossed. Her face was a mask of professional concern, but her eyes were mocking. It's called the Baker Act, Gerald, she said, her voice low and clinical. In Florida, we can have you involuntarily committed for 72 hours if we believe you are a danger to yourself or others. Neglecting your paralyzed wife because of your dementia certainly qualifies as a danger. Imagine that. 3 days in a psychiatric hold, and while you are in there sedated and confused, we will file for emergency guardianship. I looked from one to the other. The trap was elegant in its cruelty. They had prepared for this. They weren't just reacting to my early arrival. They had a contingency plan to neutralize me if I ever became a problem. They would use the legal system designed to protect the elderly as a weapon to imprison me. They would paint me as the abuser and themselves as the heroic rescuers stepping in to save Catherine from her senile husband. Who is going to believe you? Bradley hissed. You are 71 years old. You just flew back from Europe. You are exhausted. You look crazy right now. Look at yourself. You kicked down a door. You are covered in sweat. You are ranting about cameras and water glasses. To the police, you look like a man having a breakdown. I felt a cold knot of rage tighten in my chest. I wanted to strangle him. I wanted to stand up and shout the truth to the entire hospital. But I looked at the security camera in the corner of the waiting room. If I lost my temper now, if I raised my voice or laid a hand on him, I would be giving them exactly what they needed. I would be the aggressive, senile old man they were describing. They wanted a victim. They wanted a confused, helpless old man who would sign whatever paper they put in front of him just to make the noise stop. So I gave them one. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands start to tremble. I forced my breathing to become shallow and rapid. I looked down at the floor, letting my mouth hang open slightly. I channeled every ounce of fear and confusion I had felt in that room upstairs and projected it outward. I don't want to go to a home, I stammered, my voice cracking. Please, Bradley. Don't put me in a home. Bradley relaxed instantly. He sat back in his chair, the tension leaving his frame. He saw the surrender. He saw the weakness he had been counting on. He patted my knee with a condescending rhythm. Nobody wants to put you in a home, Dad, he said, his voice shifting back to the fake warmth of a loving son. We just want to help you, but you have to let us. You have to trust us. We are the only family you have left. I nodded slowly, wiping a hand across my eyes to hide the lack of tears. I'm just so tired, I whispered. I don't know what happened. I thought I left everything organized. Maybe I am getting confused. Exactly. Megan said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It happens, Gerald. Stress makes it worse. You just need to rest. We will handle the doctors. We will handle the police. You just nod and agree. Can you do that? I nodded again. Yes. Yes, I can do that. Just don't let them take me away. We won't let them take you, Bradley promised. As long as you cooperate. As long as you sign the papers we need to manage things for you. It's too much for you now. The bills, the house, Mom's care. We'll take that burden off your shoulders. He stood up and offered me his hand. I looked at it. It was the hand that had held my wife down while she screamed. It was the hand that had stolen my money. I took it. His grip was firm, victorious. Good, Bradley said. Now sit here. The police are coming. Let me do the talking. You just look sad and confused. I watched him walk toward the entrance of the ER, straightening his shirt, checking his hair in the reflection of the glass doors. He looked confident. He looked like a man who had just closed the biggest deal of his life. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. He didn't know that the hand he had just shaken was the hand that would sign his warrant. He didn't know that by threatening to put me in a home, he had just given me the moral clearance to destroy him completely. He had shown me his hand. He had shown me that there was no line he wouldn't cross. I sat back in the hard plastic chair and waited for the police. I would play the part. I would be the confused old man. I would let him think he was in control. Because a man who thinks he is in control is a man who makes mistakes. And I would be there quietly, watching, waiting to catch every single one of them. I stood on the front porch of my own home and listened to the silence. 3 hours ago, this house had been vibrating with the bass of a subwoofer and the shrieks of strangers. Now it stood dark and looming against the Florida sky like a mausoleum. The police had cleared the partygoers. The ambulance had taken my wife. Bradley and Megan were at the hospital spinning their web of lies to the doctors. I was alone. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air was still thick with the smell of spilled alcohol and stale perfume, but underneath it was the lingering scent of neglect. I did not turn on the main lights. I did not want to see the stains on the carpet or the holes in the drywall just yet. I navigated by the light of the street lamps filtering through the sheer curtains. I was not here to sleep. I was here to work. My son thought I was a confused old man who would need a nap after his long flight. He thought I was overwhelmed by grief and jet lag. He did not know that grief is a luxury I could not afford, and exhaustion is a state of mind I had learned to suppress decades ago during hostile takeovers and union strikes. I was on a mission. I was a forensic accountant in a crime scene, and the crime was the murder of my life. I walked to the kitchen island. It was covered in debris. Red plastic cups half filled with warm beer. Pizza boxes grease-stained and open. A mountain of empty liquor bottles. I pulled a box of heavy-duty trash bags from under the sink. I did not start cleaning to tidy up. I started cleaning to catalog the evidence. I picked up a bottle of champagne from the counter. It was not the cheap, sparkling wine teenagers drink. It was a bottle of Dom Perignon Vintage 2012. I recognized the label because I had bought a case of it for my retirement party 5 years ago. I had kept it in the wine cellar in the basement, intended for anniversaries and special milestones. They had cracked it open for a Tuesday night rave while my wife lay dying of thirst upstairs. I placed the empty bottle into a separate bag. I would not throw this away. This was Exhibit A. I moved around the kitchen island. My foot crunched on something paper. I looked down. It was a receipt crumpled into a ball. I smoothed it out on the granite countertop. It was from a high-end catering company in downtown Miami. Caviar, truffles, imported cheese. The date was yesterday. The total was $4,000. The signature at the bottom was a scrawl I recognized instantly. It was my signature. Or rather, it was a forgery of my signature done by a hand that shook slightly less than mine. Bradley had not just stolen my money, he had stolen my identity to feed his parasites. I placed the receipt in a clear plastic sandwich bag and put it in my pocket. Exhibit B. I continued my sweep. I found cigarette burns on the Italian leather armchair in the den. I found a shattered vase that Catherine had brought back from our honeymoon in Florence. It was swept into a corner hidden behind a potted plant. They had tried to hide the damage just like they had tried to hide the abuse. I took photos of everything with my phone. The timestamps would prove the condition of the house. The chaos downstairs was the perfect counterpoint to the horror upstairs. It proved priorities. They had time to buy truffles. They had time to invite 50 people. They did not have time to pour a glass of water. I left the kitchen and walked down the hallway to my study. This room was my sanctuary. It was where I kept the records of 40 years of business. It was where I kept the family trust documents. I had locked the heavy oak door before I left for Europe. The door was now unlocked. The wood around the latch was splintered. They had used a crowbar or a heavy screwdriver to force it open. I stepped inside and turned on the desk lamp. The room had been tossed. Papers were strewn across the floor. File cabinets were pulled open, their contents hanging out like entrails. They had been looking for something specific. They were looking for the deed to the house. They were looking for the access codes to the offshore accounts. I walked behind my desk to the large oil painting of a ship at sea. It hung crookedly. I swung it open. Behind it was the wall safe. I stared at the steel face of the safe. It was scarred. Deep gouges ran across the metal where someone had taken a power drill to the locking mechanism. There were hammer marks on the dial. They had tried to brute force their way in. They had failed. The safe was rated to withstand a diamond-tipped drill for an hour. Bradley clearly lacked the patience or the tools. I ran my fingers over the scratches. This was not the act of a son looking for insurance papers to help his sick mother. This was the act of a thief desperate for cash. This was violence. If they were willing to take a drill to steel wall, they were willing to do anything. I entered the combination. The dial turned smoothly despite the damage. The heavy door swung open. Inside, the documents were untouched. The deed, the trust fund specifications, the original copy of the power of attorney that I was going to revoke first thing in the morning, and at the back the small velvet bag containing Catherine's diamond earrings, the ones I had given her for our 30th anniversary. I checked the bag. The earrings were there. I closed the safe and locked it. They had failed to get the big prize. That explained the desperation. That explained why they needed me to sign over control voluntarily. They couldn't steal it, so they had to trick me into giving it to them. I sat down in my leather chair. I felt a wave of fatigue wash over me, but I pushed it back. I turned to my computer. The monitor hummed to life. I typed in my password. Bradley thought I was a dinosaur. He thought because I didn't have a TikTok account. I didn't understand technology. He didn't realize that logistics is all about data, tracking, monitoring, optimization. I opened the control panel for the smart home system. I had installed it 2 years ago when Catherine first had her stroke. It controlled the lights, the locks, the thermostat, and the security cameras. It also kept a detailed log of every event, every door opening, every motion detected. I navigated to the history logs for the past 5 days. I started with the front door smart lock. Monday 8:00 a.m. Door locked. Monday 8:05 a.m. Garage door opened. Car exited. Garage door closed. I scrolled down. Monday. No further activity. Tuesday. No activity. Wednesday. No activity. The house had been sealed tight. No one had entered or exited through the main doors for 3 full days. I checked the interior motion sensors. Living room. No motion detected. Kitchen. No motion detected. Master bedroom. No motion detected. My blood ran cold. The sensors didn't lie. The house had been empty. They hadn't been here caring for her. They hadn't been here struggling with a difficult patient. They had left. I opened the GPS tracker for the Lincoln Navigator. It was linked to the house account for insurance purposes. Monday, 11:30 a.m. Vehicle arrived at the Ritz-Carlton South Beach, Miami. Wednesday, 4:00 p.m. Vehicle departed the Ritz-Carlton South Beach, Miami. There it was, the irrefutable proof. They had locked my paralyzed wife in a room taped over the camera so I wouldn't see, turned off the air conditioning to save money, and driven 3 hours south to stay at a 5-star hotel. They had spent 3 days partying on the beach while Catherine lay in the dark, slowly dying of thirst. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It wasn't sadness. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a cold, burning fire that consumed the last remnants of the father I used to be. I printed the logs. The printer whirred in the quiet room, spitting out the timeline of their cruelty. I printed the GPS map. I printed the security log showing the exact moment the camera in Catherine's room was covered. It was Monday morning, right before they left. It was premeditated. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't negligence. It was a calculated decision to abandon her. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. I placed the plastic bag with the receipt on top of them. I added the photos of the damage. I sat there in the dim light of my office, surrounded by the wreckage of my trust. I thought about the boy I had adopted. I thought about the days I spent teaching him to play baseball. I thought about the college tuition I paid, the cars I bought, the weddings I financed. I had created a monster. I had fed him and clothed him and protected him from the consequences of his own mediocrity. And in return, he had tried to kill the only thing I loved. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Bradley. "Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you're sleeping. Don't worry about anything. We are handling the doctors. Love you." I looked at the message. Love you. 2 words that used to mean the world to me. Now they looked like a threat. I did not reply. I turned off the phone. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out a fresh manila folder. I picked up my pen. On the tab of the folder, I wrote one word in block capital letters: evidence. I placed the stack of papers inside. I stood up and walked to the window. The sky was beginning to lighten. The birds were starting to sing, oblivious to the tragedy within these walls. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I had the means. Now I needed the executioner. I checked my watch. 6:00 a.m. Leonard would be waking up. The bank manager would be getting his coffee. The detective's shift change would be happening at the precinct. I went to the bathroom attached to my office. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me was old. His eyes were rimmed with red. His skin was gray, but his jaw was set. I shaved. I dressed in a fresh suit. I tied my tie with precise mechanical movements. I polished my shoes. I was not going to look like a victim. I was going to look like a man in charge. I walked out of the house, leaving the mess exactly as it was. I wanted the police to see it. I wanted the jury to see it. I wanted the world to smell the stench of their party. I got into my second car, a small sedan I kept for errands. I backed out of the driveway. I took one last look at the window of Catherine's room. "Hold on, Katie," I whispered. "I'm coming for them." I put the car in drive and headed toward the city. The sun was rising, and with it the reckoning. The night of lies was over. The day of judgment had begun. I parked my sedan in the reserved lot of First National Bank. The sun was fully up now, casting long, hard shadows across the pavement. I needed coffee. My head was throbbing from the lack of sleep and the adrenaline crash. I walked into the small cafe next to the bank branch. I ordered a black coffee and a bagel. I didn't want to eat, but I knew I needed fuel. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my platinum debit card. It was a heavy card, the kind that usually commands respect. I tapped it on the reader. A sharp beep followed. The barista, a young girl with purple hair, looked at the screen and frowned. "It didn't go through," she said. I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. "Try it again," I said. "It's a chip error." She inserted the chip. Another beep. Declined. Insufficient funds. There were people in line behind me. I could feel their eyes on my back. I was Gerald Thompson. I had been a captain of industry. I had tipped waiters with $100 bills, and now I couldn't buy a $3 coffee. I pulled out my backup credit card, the one with the $50,000 limit. Declined. I pulled out the emergency cash card I kept hidden in the lining of my wallet. Declined. I looked at the barista. She looked at me with pity. It was that look that broke me. Not anger. Pity. She thought I was just another broke old man living beyond his means. "It's on the house, sweetie," she said, sliding the coffee toward me. "Don't worry about it." I left the bagel. I took the coffee. I walked out of the shop with my head high, but inside I was burning. Bradley hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my dignity. He had reduced me to a charity case. I walked straight into the bank. The air conditioning was freezing. I walked past the teller's line and went straight to the glass office at the back. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, looked up. He saw me and his face went pale. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. "Mr. Thompson," he said, smoothing his tie. I didn't expect to see you." I walked in and closed the door behind me. I sat down. "Print them," I said. Mr. Henderson didn't ask what. He knew. He sat down and typed furiously. The printer in the corner whirred. He handed me a stack of papers. They were still warm. I looked at the balance on my primary checking account. 0. I looked at the savings account. 0. I looked at the investment liquidity account. Negative. Overdrawn. $214,000. Gone. In 48 hours. I flipped through the transaction logs. It was a massacre. It wasn't just one big transfer. It was death by 1,000 cuts. A $5,000 transfer to a crypto wallet. A $10,000 payment to an online casino based in Malta. A $20,000 wire transfer to an account named simply Vipers LLC. I looked up at Henderson. "How did this happen?" I asked. My voice was calm, but it was the calm before a hurricane. "These transfers trigger fraud alerts. I have two-factor authentication. I have daily limits." Henderson swallowed hard. We did flag them, Mr. Thompson. We sent verification requests to your mobile device. They were approved instantly via biometrics. Face ID. I froze. Face ID. My mind flashed back to Sunday afternoon, the day before my flight to Europe. I was tired. I was packing. I sat down on the recliner in the living room to rest my eyes for a moment. I must have dozed off. I remembered waking up to the feeling of someone close to me. I had opened my eyes and seen Bradley hovering over me holding my phone. "Sorry, Dad," he had said, smiling that boyish smile. "Just checking the weather for your trip." The phone was right in front of my face. He hadn't been checking the weather. He had been unlocking my banking app. And while I slept or in that groggy moment of waking, he had used my face to authorize a new device. He had cloned my access. He had installed the app on his own phone and linked it to my biometric profile. He had literally stolen my face. I looked back at the statement. The timestamps confirmed it. The transfers started 10 minutes after my flight took off. He knew I would be in the air. He knew I would be offline for 9 hours. By the time I landed in London, he had already moved 50,000. And then the spending spree began. I saw charges for the catering, charges for the liquor store, but then I saw other things. Things that made my stomach turn. Luxury car rental, $2,000. Rolex dealership, $12,000. VIP table at Club 11. $1,000. He wasn't just paying debts. He was celebrating. He was celebrating my absence. He was celebrating the death of his mother, which he viewed as inevitable and profitable. But then I saw the transfers that scared me. Vipers LLC. 5 transfers of $10,000 each. "Who is Vipers LLC?" I asked Henderson. The manager hesitated. We looked into it when the first wire went through. It's a shell company, registered in the Caymans. But the receiving bank is local. It's a known front, Mr. Thompson." "For who?" "For loan sharks," Henderson whispered. "The kind who break legs." I sat back. The puzzle pieces slammed together. Bradley wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. He had gambled away everything he had, and then he had borrowed from people you don't borrow from. He needed my money not to get rich, but to stay alive. He had stripped me clean to save his own skin. I looked at the last page of the statement. There was a pending transaction. A request for a home equity line of credit against the house. It was dated yesterday. "He tried to mortgage the house?" I asked. Henderson nodded. "He came in yesterday with a power of attorney document. He said you were incapacitated. He said you had a stroke in Europe and he needed to access the equity to pay for your medical transport." I felt a vein throb in my temple. He had told the bank I was dying. He had killed me off on paper to get a loan. "Did you approve it?" I asked. "No," Henderson said. The signature on the power of attorney looked shaky, and the notary stamp looked blurred. "We put a hold on it pending verification. That's why he emptied the cash accounts instead. He couldn't get the big money, so he took the liquid money." I stood up. I folded the statements and put them in my inside pocket. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I want you to freeze everything. I want you to flag my accounts for identity theft. I want you to prepare a sworn affidavit stating that my son attempted to access the home equity using a fraudulent document." I will do it immediately, Henderson said. But Mr. Thompson, you have no money access right now. How will you? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black leather notebook. I opened it and extracted a single crisp check. It was drawn on a bank in Zurich. I am not broke, Mr. Henderson, I said. I have resources my son knows nothing about. Deposit this into a new account, an account solely in my name, and do not issue a debit card. I will deal in cash and checks only. Henderson looked at the check. His eyes widened. It was for $50,000. I walked out of the bank. The sun was blinding. I had no coffee, but I was wide awake. My son had gambled with my life. He had bet against his mother's survival. He had bet against my intelligence. Now he was going to learn the first rule of gambling. The house always wins, and I was the house. I checked my watch. My next stop was the company that supplied the private nurses. I needed to know why Megan, a registered nurse, was the only one caring for my wife when I was paying $8,000 a month for professional help. I had a feeling the answer was going to be another nail in Bradley's coffin. I got into my car and slammed the door. The hunt continued. I drove to the offices of Guardian Care with the air conditioning blasting against the sweat on my forehead. It was a nondescript brick building on the edge of the medical district, the kind of place that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I had chosen them 2 years ago because they were the most expensive, the most reputable, and they promised a level of care that money usually could not buy. I paid them $8,000 a month to ensure that a certified nursing assistant was by my wife's side 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I walked up to the reception desk. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly. "Can I help you, sir? I am Gerald Thompson," I said. "I am here to speak with the director regarding the care of Catherine Thompson." The smile faltered slightly. "One moment, Mr. Thompson." She typed something into her computer, frowned, and then picked up the phone. A moment later, a woman in a business suit came out. "Mr. Thompson, please come back. We haven't heard from you in quite some time." I followed her into a small office. I sat down. "I want to see the shift logs for the last 2 weeks," I said. "I want to know who was assigned to my house while I was traveling." The director looked confused. She folded her hands on the desk. "Mr. Thompson, I think there is a misunderstanding. We haven't had personnel at your residence in 6 months." The room seemed to tilt. 6 months. I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "Your daughter-in-law, Megan Thompson, called us in January. She stated that as a registered nurse, she would be taking over full-time care of Mrs. Thompson to save the family money. She canceled the contract effective immediately. We sent a confirmation letter to your home address." I never saw a letter. "Because Bradley checked the mail." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "She canceled the contract in January," I repeated. "Yes, sir. We were sorry to lose you as a client. We actually noted in the file that we were concerned about the level of care falling on a single family member, but Mrs. Thompson insisted. She said it was your decision." I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the desk. I simply nodded. "Thank you," I said. "Could you please print me a copy of that cancellation order and the call log recording that conversation?" "Of course." I walked out of the office 10 minutes later with a piece of paper that proved my daughter-in-law was not just lazy, she was a thief. I sat in my car and did the math. $8,000 a month. 6 months. $48,000. I had still been writing the checks every month. I wrote them to cash at Bradley's request because he said it was easier to pay the agency directly if he handled the administrative side. I had handed him $48,000 to pay for care that never happened. And where did that money go? I thought about the new designer handbags I had seen Megan carrying. I thought about the spa weekends she claimed she won in contests. I thought about the brand new car she was driving, which she said was a lease special. They had monetized my wife's suffering. Every hour Catherine lay alone in her own filth was $1 in Megan's pocket. They had turned neglect into a profit margin. But I needed more than a canceled contract. A canceled contract was fraud. I needed proof of what happened inside that room during those 6 months. I needed to see the quality of care Megan claimed she was providing. I drove to a quiet park and opened my laptop. I connected to the cloud server where my home security data was stored. Bradley and Megan knew about the camera in the master bedroom. They had taped over it on Monday before leaving for Miami. But they were sloppy. They assumed the camera only recorded what it saw. They forgot that modern security cameras also record audio. And they forgot that I had installed a second, smaller camera inside the smoke detector 2 years ago, a backup system battery-operated and completely independent of the main network. I had never checked the backup camera because I trusted them. I had been a fool. I logged into the backup system. It took a long time to load. The files were heavy. I scrolled back to January, to the week the professional nurses were fired. I found a video file dated January 15th. The timestamp was 10:00 a.m. I clicked play. The angle was high, looking down from the ceiling. The room was bright. Catherine was in bed, looking much healthier than she did now. Megan walked into the room. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. She was holding a bowl of oatmeal. She walked to the side of the bed. She didn't say good morning. She didn't smile. "Open up," she said. Her voice was flat, bored. Catherine made a small sound. She tried to move her head. Megan sighed loudly. "I don't have all day, Catherine. Eat it!" She shoved the spoon into Catherine's mouth. It was too fast. Catherine choked, coughing, oatmeal spilling down her chin onto the sheets. "Look at this mess," Megan snapped. She grabbed a towel and scrubbed Catherine's face hard. "Rough." Catherine winced, her eyes filling with tears. "You are such a burden," Megan said. "Do you know that you are a useless weight? Why don't you just let go? It would be easier for everyone, especially Bradley. He's waiting for the money, you know. We all are." I watched my hand gripping the edge of the laptop so hard, my knuckles turned white. Megan finished feeding her, scraping the bowl with aggressive strokes. Then she did something that made me stop breathing. She leaned down close to Catherine's face. "If you tell Gerald I was mean to you," she whispered, "I will leave you in the dark all day. I will turn off the TV. I will close the blinds, and no one will hear you scream. Do you understand?" Catherine blinked rapidly, tears rolling down her temples into her hair. Megan smiled. "Good girl." She walked out of the room and slammed the door. I sat in my car, staring at the screen. The video ended, but the image of Megan's cruel smile was burned into my retinas. This wasn't just neglect. This was active, sadistic abuse. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed the power she had over a helpless woman. She enjoyed tormenting the mother who had welcomed her into the family. I fast-forwarded through the months. It was a catalog of horrors. February, Megan ignoring Catherine's cries for help while she talked on the phone for an hour, laughing with a friend. March, Megan changing Catherine's diaper with such roughness that I saw my wife grimace in agony. I saw Megan slap Catherine's leg when she spasmed. "Stop moving, you twitchy witch," she had said. April, Bradley coming into the room. He stood at the foot of the bed staring at his mother. He didn't say hello. He just looked at her like she was a piece of furniture that was taking up too much space. "Still breathing," he muttered. Then he walked out. I watched until I couldn't watch anymore. I had seen enough. I had thousands of hours of footage. I had the evidence to put them away for a very long time. But the most damning clip was from 3 days ago, Monday morning. The camera angle showed Bradley standing on a chair, putting the black tape over the main camera lens. "That should do it," he said. Megan was standing by the door holding her suitcase. Did you give her the sedative? Bradley asked. Double dose, Megan replied. She'll be out for 12 hours. By the time she wakes up, she'll be too weak to make noise. And the water? I left a glass. If she wants it, she can crawl for it. It's not my problem if she's thirsty. They laughed. They actually laughed. Then they turned off, the lights, walked out, and locked the door. The sound of the lock clicking shut echoed through the recording. I closed the laptop. I carefully placed it in its case. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of a man who knows exactly what he has to do. Megan wasn't a nurse. She was a monster in scrubs. She had used her medical knowledge not to heal, but to hide the evidence of her cruelty. She knew exactly how much sedative to give to avoid an overdose but ensure silence. She knew how to cause pain without leaving marks visible to the untrained eye. But she had forgotten the one rule of the digital age. Someone is always watching. I started the car. I had the financial records. I had the medical report. And now I had the video evidence of torture. There was only one piece left: the legal trap. I needed to sign that guardianship paper. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to throw that party so I could play this video on the biggest screen in the house. I drove toward the nursing home facility, where Leonard had arranged a temporary room for me to rest and meet him. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to edit a movie, and the premiere was going to be the end of my son's life. I sat in the sterile guest room of the assisted living facility Leonard had arranged for me. It was a safe house masquerading as a nursing home. The walls were beige, the air smelled of lavender disinfectant, and the door locked from the inside. I was safe here, but I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. I checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. Right on schedule, my phone buzzed. It was the front desk. Mr. Thompson, your son is here. He has a gentleman with him. They say it is an urgent legal matter. Send them up, I said. I put my phone on the table, face down, recording. I sat in the armchair and let my posture collapse. I allowed my mouth to slacken slightly. I stared at a spot on the carpet, as if I were trying to remember a math equation I had forgotten decades ago. I needed to look like a man whose hard drive was crashing. There was a knock, and before I could answer, the door pushed open. Bradley walked in. He looked energized, manic almost. The dark circles under his eyes were still there, but they were masked by the high of imminent victory. Behind him walked a man who looked like he had been squeezed out of a tube of cheap hair gel. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a tie that was too wide. He carried a leather briefcase that looked scuffed at the corners. Dad, Bradley said, his voice booming in the small room. Good, you're up. I brought someone to help us sort this mess out. This is Mr. Salinger. He's a specialist in elder law. Mr. Salinger stepped forward and extended a hand that felt damp. An honor, Mr. Thompson. Your son has told me so much about you. We are just here to make sure you are protected. I looked at Salinger. I knew his type. He wasn't a specialist. He was a bottom feeder. He was the kind of lawyer who chased ambulances and drafted wills for people who didn't know they were signing them. He was exactly who I expected Bradley to find on short notice. Protected from what I asked, keeping my voice thin and raspy. From everything Gerald Bradley said sitting on the edge of the bed. From the stress, from the bills. Look, we know you're struggling. The incident with Mom. It showed us that you can't handle the day-to-day anymore. And that's okay. You worked hard. You deserve to rest. Salinger clicked open his briefcase. He pulled out a thick document stapled in blue legal backing. He placed it on the small round table in front of me. This is a standard durable power of attorney and a guardianship transfer, Salinger said, tapping the paper with a pen that looked like a fake Mont Blanc. It simply allows Bradley to handle the bank accounts, the medical decisions, and the property management. It stops the state from stepping in. You don't want the state involved, do you, Gerald? They put people in state facilities, terrible places. The threat was subtle, but it was there. Sign this or rot in a state ward. I picked up the document. My hand trembled. It wasn't Parkinson's. It was rage vibrating through my skeletal structure. I pretended to read it. It was a hatchet job. It gave Bradley unrestricted access to everything. The right to sell real estate, the right to liquidate stocks, the right to make end-of-life decisions. It was a death warrant for my autonomy. I turned the pages slowly. I saw the clause about the house. I saw the clause about the safe deposit boxes. If I sign this, I asked. Looking up at Bradley. What happens to me? You stay here for a bit. Bradley said, his eyes gleaming. Just until we get the house fixed up. Then we'll see. Maybe we find a nice place in the mountains, like you always wanted. Liar. He was going to dump me in the cheapest hole he could find the moment the check cleared. I flipped to the signature page. There were 3 lines. One for me, one for a witness, one for the notary. Salinger pulled a notary stamp out of his pocket. I can notarize it right here. Very convenient. That was illegal. A lawyer representing the beneficiary cannot usually notarize the document for the principal in the same transaction, especially not without an independent witness. But Salinger didn't care about the law. He cared about the $5,000 Bradley had probably promised him. I need a pen, I whispered. Bradley scrambled to hand me one. Here, Dad. Right here. Just sign where the sticky note is. I held the pen over the paper. I hesitated. I looked at Bradley. You promise you'll take care of Mom? I asked. Bradley nodded vigorously. Of course. She's my priority. We're going to get her the best specialists money can buy. Once we access the accounts, we can transfer her to a private clinic. He was lying to my face about the woman he had tortured. It took every ounce of my discipline not to drive the pen into his neck. Instead, I lowered the tip to the paper. I knew something Bradley didn't know. I knew something Salinger should have checked, but didn't because he was sloppy. My legal name. The name on the deed to the house, the name on the original trust documents, and the name on my passport was Gerald Patrick Thompson. My signature on file with every bank since 1980 was a complex looping script that spelled out G. Patrick Thompson. But on this document, Salinger had typed my name simply as Gerald Thompson. If I signed it with my usual legal signature, it would create a discrepancy. But if I signed it exactly as he had typed it, Gerald Thompson, in a shaky, unpracticed hand, it would be even better. It would be a signature that matched no known exemplar in my banking history. It would be a signature that looked nothing like the man who authorized millions in trades. And crucially, I was going to make one specific fatal error. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed Gerald. Then I stopped. I lifted the pen. I skipped the middle name entirely. I signed Thompson. And then right at the end, where the date line was, I wrote the wrong year. I wrote 2023 instead of 2024. A document with a mismatched signature name and an incorrect date signed under duress without an independent witness. It wasn't a legal document. It was toilet paper. But to them, it looked like victory. I sat back, dropping the pen. There, I said. I'm tired now. Bradley snatched the paper. He stared at the signature. He didn't check the date. He didn't check the spelling. He just saw the ink. He grinned. He looked at Salinger, who stamped it with a heavy thud. Done, Salinger said. Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. You've made the right choice. Bradley stood up. He looked taller. He looked like he owned the world. He put the document in his jacket pocket. "You rest, Dad," he said. "We have a lot of work to do. In fact, listen, I'm having a few people over to the house tonight. Just close friends. To celebrate. You know the new arrangement. A sort of housewarming. Since I'll be managing the estate now." He was throwing a party. He was inviting the Sharks. He was going to show them the paper and promise them they would be paid in the morning. "You should come, Dad," Bradley said, a cruel glint in his eye. "It might be nice for you to see everyone. Say goodbye to the house properly." He wanted to parade me. He wanted to show his creditors that the old lion was toothless and leashed. I looked at him. I saw the trap he had just laid for himself. He was gathering all his enemies and all his victims in one room. "I think I will come," I said. "I would like to make a toast. To the future." Bradley laughed. It was a barking, ugly sound. "Sure, Dad. You can make a toast. Just don't ramble." They left the room. I heard them high-fiving in the hallway. I waited until their footsteps faded. Then I picked up my phone. I stopped the recording. I dialed Leonard. "He signed it?" Leonard asked. "He thinks I did," I replied. "He's holding a celebration tonight. Everyone will be there. The loan sharks, the enablers, Megan." "Is the presentation ready?" Leonard asked. "It is," I said. "Leonard, bring the police to the perimeter at 8:30. But tell them to wait for my signal. I want Bradley to make his speech first. I want him to hold that paper up in the air. I want him to feel the weight of the crown before I chop off his head." "Understood," Leonard said. "See you tonight, Gerald." I stood up and walked to the closet. I had one suit left. It was a charcoal gray three-piece. It was the suit I wore when I fired people. I began to dress. I adjusted my cufflinks. I tightened my tie. My son thought he had just inherited a kingdom. He didn't realize he had just signed an admission of guilt. He had invited the devil to dinner, and he didn't know that the devil was his father. Tonight, the music would stop, and the only thing playing would be my video. The house was blazing with light. It stood out against the dark suburban street like a lighthouse warning ships of jagged rocks. I parked my sedan 2 houses down behind a row of black SUVs that were parked on the grass. These were not the cars of college students or suburban neighbors. These were vehicles with tinted windows and reinforced bumpers. They were the cars of men who collected debts. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror. The charcoal suit fit me perfectly, a reminder of the man I used to be before I became a caregiver and a victim. I checked my pocket. The USB drive containing the video evidence was there. I checked my other pocket. The remote control for the home media system was there. I stepped out into the humid night air. I didn't walk with the shuffle Bradley expected. I walked with the stride of a CEO entering a board meeting to fire the entire executive team. The front door was open. The music tonight wasn't the thumping bass of a rave. It was smooth jazz playing at a volume that allowed for conversation, but covered the sound of threats. The air didn't smell like cheap pot anymore. It smelled of expensive cigars and heavy cologne. I walked into the foyer. The crowd was smaller than the previous night, perhaps 30 people, but the density of danger was significantly higher. Bradley was standing in the center of the living room under the chandelier. He was holding a crystal tumbler of my best scotch. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, trying to look the part of the landed gentry. Megan was on his arm wearing diamonds that belonged to my wife. He saw me enter. A grin split his face. It wasn't a smile of welcome. It was the smile of a hunter seeing a trapped animal walk into the cage. Dad Bradley shouted, spreading his arms. "Look who decided to join the party. Everyone, this is my father. The man who made all of this possible." The room went quiet. 30 pairs of eyes turned to me. They weren't looking at a person. They were looking at collateral. They were assessing my health, calculating how long I would last, estimating how quickly my assets could be liquidated to pay Bradley's gambling debts. I walked toward him. I kept my face blank, my eyes slightly unfocused. I needed to sell the image of the confused, compliant old man one last time. "Hello, son," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You said there was a celebration." "There is," Bradley said, throwing an arm around my shoulder. It was heavy and possessive. "We are celebrating the future. We are celebrating the transition." He steered me toward a group of men sitting on the leather sofas. I recognized the man in the center. He was short, thick-necked, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He was looking at me with dead, shark-like eyes. "Dad, I want you to meet Mr. Vargas," Bradley said. "Mr. Vargas is an investor. He's going to help us leverage the equity in the estate to expand my business." I knew exactly who Mr. Vargas was. He was the owner of Vipers LLC. He was the man who broke knees for a living. Mr. Vargas stood up. He didn't offer his hand. He looked me up and down, inspecting me like I was a horse at an auction. "So this is the goose that lays the golden eggs," Vargas said. His voice was like gravel. "He looks tired, Bradley." "He is tired," Bradley said quickly, his grip on my shoulder tightening. "That's why I'm taking over." He signed the papers today. Full power of attorney. Guardianship. Everything is under my control now. Vargas looked at me. "You signed the papers, old man." I nodded slowly. "I signed them." Bradley says he will take care of everything." Vargas laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I bet he will." "Well, Bradley, as long as the paperwork is solid, our business can proceed. But I want to see the deed transfer by Monday morning." "Monday morning," Bradley promised. "First thing." He guided me away from the sharks toward the kitchen. He poured me a glass of tap water. He didn't offer me the scotch. "Here, Dad. Hydrate. We don't want you passing out before the toast." He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Don't speak unless spoken to," he hissed. "These are serious people. Do not embarrass me. You just stand there and look grateful. If you mess this up, the nursing home I find for you will be one of those places that smells like bleach and death." "Do you understand?" I looked at him. I saw the absolute arrogance in his eyes. He truly believed he had won. He believed I was a piece of furniture, an old rug he could roll up and store in the attic until he needed to pawn it. "I understand, Bradley," I said. He patted my cheek. A humiliating, infantilizing tap. "Good boy." He walked back to the center of the room. He clinked a spoon against his glass. The room fell silent. "Gentlemen, friends, partners," Bradley began, his voice booming. "Thank you for coming tonight. I know the last few days have been complicated, but I am happy to announce that the transition is complete." He pulled the fraudulent power of attorney document from his pocket and waved it in the air like a flag. "As of this afternoon, I have taken full legal control of the Thompson estate. My father has graciously decided to step down. He realizes that the modern world is a bit too fast for him. He wants to rest, and I am going to let him." The crowd murmured their approval. They didn't care about my rest. They cared about their money. Bradley pointed at me. I stood by the kitchen island, clutching my glass of water. "This house, this land, the accounts, they are now under new management," Bradley declared. "And to my creditors I say this. The liquidity issues are over. Monday, everyone gets paid, and then we build an empire." Megan clapped enthusiastically. She looked at me with a sneer. She mouthed the words, "Bye-bye." They were already spending the money. They were already remodeling the house in their minds. They had erased me while I was still standing in the room. Bradley turned to me. "Dad," he said, his voice dripping with mock affection. "Would you like to say a word?" Maybe thank everyone for coming to your retirement party. It was the ultimate insult. He wanted me to bless his theft. He wanted me to publicly validate his lies so that the loan sharks would feel secure in their investment. I looked at the room. I looked at Vargas, who was checking his watch. I looked at Megan, who was admiring her stolen diamonds. I looked at Bradley, who was glowing with the power he thought he possessed. I set my water glass down on the counter. I straightened my back. I adjusted my cuffs. I reached into my pocket and gripped the remote control. "Yes, son," I said. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was the voice that had commanded boardrooms in London, Tokyo, and New York. It was a voice that projected to the back of the room without a microphone. "I would like to say a few words. I have prepared a special presentation for this evening. A sort of handover ceremony." Bradley frowned. He hadn't expected the tone shift. He hadn't expected the clarity. "Keep it short, Dad," he warned. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Oh, it will be short, Bradley, but I think you will find it very educational." I pointed the remote at the massive 80-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The screen that Bradley had bought with my stolen money 3 days ago. I pressed the power button. The screen flared to life. I pressed play. The room went dark as the lights dimmed automatically, a feature of the smart home system Bradley loved so much. The music stopped. The only sound was the hum of the television speakers kicking in. Bradley took a step toward me. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I am showing your guests the true nature of your inheritance," I said. And then the video began. I drove from the nursing home to the financial district. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was a storm of calculations. I had the evidence of abuse. I had the evidence of theft. I had the fraudulent power of attorney document my son believed was valid. Now I needed the firepower to turn these pieces of paper into a prison sentence. I pulled into the underground garage of the Katz & Associates building. Leonard Katz didn't just have an office. He had a fortress on the 42nd floor. I took the private elevator up. When the doors opened, Leonard was waiting for me. He wasn't alone. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city skyline was a man in a uniform that commanded respect. It was Chief of Police Marcus Reynolds. We had served on the city council together 15 years ago. He was a man of few words and absolute integrity. He was the hammer I needed to crush the snake I had raised. Gerald Reynolds said, turning around. He didn't smile. He saw the look on my face. "Leonard told me everything." Is it true I didn't answer with words? I walked to the mahogany conference table and opened my laptop. I connected it to the large monitor on the wall. I played the video from the backup camera. I played the clip of Megan taunting Catherine with the water. I played the clip of Bradley laughing as he taped over the main lens. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the tinny recorded voices of my son and his wife. I watched Reynolds's face. I saw his jaw tighten until the muscle jumped. I saw his hands ball into fists at his sides. "Turn it off," Reynolds said quietly. "That's enough." I closed the laptop. "I can have a squad car at your house in 10 minutes, Reynolds said. "I can have them in cuffs before lunch. Elder abuse, neglect, assault. This is a slam dunk, Gerald. Why are we sitting here?" I looked at Leonard. He was sitting at the head of the table, his fingers steepled. He knew why. "Because if we arrest them now," Leonard said, his voice calm and icy, "they make bail. They hire a defense attorney who argues that the video is out of context or that Gerald manipulated the footage. They claim it was a momentary lapse in judgment due to caregiver burnout. They get a plea deal, 2 years probation, maybe 6 months in minimum security." Reynolds scoffed. "Caregiver burnout. They went to Miami to party. And a jury might buy it," I said. "Bradley is charismatic. Megan knows how to cry on cue. I don't want a trial that drags on for years while they spend my money on their defense. I leaned forward. I want them buried, Marcus. I want them to go away for so long that when they come out, they won't even recognize the world. And to do that, we need more than abuse. We need fraud. Massive, undeniable felony fraud committed in front of witnesses. Leonard slid a file across the table. The trust, Gerald. The irrevocable trust we set up 5 years ago. I nodded. The trust was the nuclear option. When I retired, I transferred the deed of the house and the bulk of my investment portfolio into a trust. I was the trustee, but the assets did not technically belong to me personally. They belonged to the entity. And crucially, the trust had a specific clause. If any beneficiary attempted to encumber mortgage or sell trust assets using fraudulent means, or if they were found to be involved in criminal activity related to the estate, they were automatically disinherited. Nothing. Bradley thinks he owns the house now, I said. He thinks that power of attorney document gives him the right to leverage the property to pay off his loan sharks. Exactly, Leonard said. And tonight at this party he intends to announce that ownership. He intends to hand over the deed or a promise of the deed to Mr. Vargas. Vargas Reynolds asked, his eyebrows raising. The loan shark, the same, I said. Bradley owes him $100,000. He invited Vargas to the house tonight to prove he has the collateral to pay him back. Leonard smiled. It was a shark's smile. If Bradley attempts to use the house as collateral for a loan using a forged power of attorney, that is bank fraud. That is wire fraud. That is grand larceny. And since Vargas is involved, it potentially triggers RICO statutes. We aren't talking about probation anymore, Marcus. We are talking about 20 years in federal prison. Reynolds looked at the file. He looked at me. So you want to let him do it, Reynolds said. You want to let him stand up in front of everyone and commit the crime. I want to catch him with his hand in the jar, I said. I want him to believe he has succeeded. I want him to feel the relief of thinking he is safe. And then I want to take it all away. Reynolds nodded slowly. He understood. This wasn't just law enforcement. This was an execution. All right, Reynolds said. I will have a team in unmarked cars down the street. We will wait for your signal. But Gerald, once we go in, there is no going back. Your son will be a felon. My son died a long time ago, I said. The man in my house is just a thief wearing his face. We spent the next hour coordinating the details. Reynolds would position his men at the perimeter at 8:30 p.m. Leonard would arrive with me, ostensibly as my legal counsel, to verify the transition of power, but in reality to serve as the witness to the fraud. When the meeting was over, I asked for a private room in the office. I had one last task to complete. I sat in a small soundproof office with my laptop. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a director. I opened my video editing software. I imported the clips from the security cameras. I imported the audio recordings of their conversations. I imported the screenshots of the bank transfers. I began to assemble my presentation. I started with the footage of them leaving for Miami. The laughter. The suitcases. Then I cut to the footage of Catherine alone in the dark room. I synced the audio of Megan mocking Catherine's thirst with the video of them clinking champagne glasses in South Beach. It was brutal work. Watching the footage again and again, seeing the casual cruelty of the people I loved, tore at me. But I forced myself to watch. I needed the timing to be perfect. I needed the narrative to be undeniable. I added captions, timestamps. I highlighted the moment the camera was taped over. I highlighted the moment Bradley forged my signature on the catering receipt. I titled the video simply, The Truth. I saved it to a USB drive. I made 3 copies, one for the police, one for Leonard, and one for the 80-inch television screen in my living room. I held the small metal drive in my hand. It weighed less than an ounce, but it contained the weight of a lifetime of betrayal. I walked out of the office. Leonard was waiting. "It's done," I said. Leonard nodded. He looked at his watch. "It's time to go to the party, Gerald." I adjusted my tie. I checked my reflection in the glass door. I didn't look like a grieving husband. I looked like a man going to war. "Let's go," I said. "I don't want to be late for my own retirement." We took the elevator down. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. Darkness was coming. But for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was bringing the light, and it was going to burn them all to ash. The air in the living room was thick enough to choke on. It was a miasma of expensive cigars, heavy cologne, and the metallic scent of greed. I stood by the kitchen island, clutching my glass of tap water, and watched the ecosystem of my home being invaded by parasites. Bradley had gone to great lengths to make this look like a legitimate gathering of high society, but you cannot mask the stench of desperation with catering and jazz. I observed the guests. There were about 30 of them scattered across the room. A few were Bradley's old college friends, men who had never quite grown up, still wearing their fraternity rings and laughing too loudly at unfunny jokes. They were the enablers, the ones who had watched Bradley spiral into gambling addiction and cheered him on. Then there was Megan holding court near the fireplace. She was wearing a silk dress that I knew cost more than the monthly salary of the nurses she had fired. She was laughing, throwing her head back, displaying the diamond necklace that belonged to Catherine. It was a vintage piece, Art Deco platinum and sapphires. Seeing it around her neck felt like a physical blow, a desecration of my wife's body. But the most important people in the room were the ones who weren't laughing. They were the men in the dark suits standing near the periphery watching Bradley with the dead, unblinking eyes of apex predators. Mr. Vargas was the alpha, but his lieutenants were there too. I recognized the type. I had dealt with union breakers and corporate raiders in the 80s who had more warmth in their souls than these men. They were not here for the canapes. They were here for the collateral. They were looking at the crown molding the original artwork on the walls and the marble floors, and they were calculating the liquidation value. They were mentally stripping the copper wire from the walls. Bradley moved through the room with a frantic, manic energy. He was sweating through his suit. He gripped people's shoulders too hard when he greeted them. He laughed too abruptly. He was a man walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, trying to convince the vipers that he was one of them. He clapped his hands for attention. The sound was sharp and commanding, or at least he hoped it was. "Everyone please gather round," Bradley shouted, his voice booming a little too loudly in the confined space. The music lowered. The conversation died down. The sharks turned their heads. Megan glided to Bradley's side, slipping her arm through his, playing the part of the supportive hostess. They looked like royalty presiding over a court of thieves. "I want to thank you all for coming on such short notice," Bradley began. He raised his glass of my best scotch. "Tonight is a very special night. It marks the beginning of a new chapter for the Thompson family. As many of you know, my father Gerald has been the rock of this family for decades. He built an empire. He provided for us. He led us. He gestured toward me. I stood still, my face a mask of polite confusion. I let my shoulders hunch slightly. I let my hand tremble just enough to ripple the water in my glass. I needed them to see a relic. I needed them to see a man who was finished. But Bradley continued, his voice dropping to a register of mock solemnity. "Time comes for all of us. The last few years have been hard on Dad. Mom's illness. It took a toll. And recently we've noticed that the burden has become too heavy. He forgets things. He gets confused about finances. He wanders. It's heartbreaking to watch the strongest man you know start to fade." He paused for effect. Megan wiped a non-existent tear from her eye. The performance was nauseatingly perfect. So Bradley said, brightening up again, "We made a family decision. Dad has agreed for his own health and safety to step back. He has signed over the management of the estate, the properties, and the investments to me. He wants to rest. He wants to spend his remaining time without the stress of the modern world. And I am honored, truly honored, to take up that mantle, to protect his legacy, and to grow it. He pulled the folded document from his breast pocket. He didn't open it. He just held it up like a holy relic. To the Thompson legacy, Bradley shouted. And to the future. To the future, the room echoed. Vargas didn't say it. He just took a sip of his drink, his eyes locked on the paper in Bradley's hand. Bradley beamed. He looked at me. Come here, Dad. Come say a few words. Don't be shy. This was the moment. He wanted the seal of approval. He wanted me to publicly validate his theft so that Vargas would release the pressure on his neck. He wanted the old king to kneel before the usurper. I set my water glass down on the granite countertop. I took a breath. I felt the change happen inside me. It was a physical shift. My spine straightened. The tremor in my hands vanished. The fog I had projected in my eyes cleared, replaced by the cold, hard glint of a man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers while his competitors were still reading the morning paper. I walked toward the center of the room. I did not shuffle. I moved with a predator's grace. The crowd parted for me, perhaps sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. I reached Bradley. He was smiling, but as I got closer, I saw the smile falter. He saw my eyes. He saw the clarity. For a second, doubt flickered in his gaze, but he pushed it down. He was too deep in his own delusion to recognize the danger. Here, Dad, Bradley said, handing me the microphone he had set up for the occasion. Just keep it brief, okay? Thank everyone for coming. I took the microphone. It was heavy, solid. A weapon. I turned to face the room. I looked at Vargas. I looked at Megan. I looked at the enablers. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It was uncomfortable. It was heavy. It forced them to look at me, really. Look at me. Thank you, Bradley, I said. My voice was not the raspy whisper of the nursing home. It was deep, resonant, and steady. It filled the room without effort. My son is right, I continued. Tonight is indeed a special night. It is a night of revelation. Bradley told you that I am tired. He told you that I am confused. He told you that I am fading. I paused. I walked slowly toward Vargas. I stopped 3 feet from him. Do I look confused to you, Mr. Vargas? Vargas narrowed his eyes. He didn't answer, but his body tensed. He recognized the tone. It was the tone of a man who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. I turned back to the room. My son told you that I signed a document today, transferring control of my life to him. He holds that paper in his hand like a winning lottery ticket. He believes that this piece of paper grants him access to my bank accounts, my real estate portfolio, and the trust fund that protects this family. I looked at Bradley. He was frowning now. He took a half step forward. Dad, what are you doing? Stick to the script. There is no script, Bradley, I said sharply. I turned back to the guests. My son invited you here tonight because he owes you money. He owes a lot of money to people who do not have a sense of humor. He invited you here to show you that he has the means to pay you back. He is using my home, my life's work as collateral for his mistakes. The room began to murmur. The nervous energy spiked. But there is something my son forgot. I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a knife. He forgot that I built this empire by paying attention to details. He forgot that I made my fortune by spotting frauds before they could sign the check. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote control. Bradley stepped forward, his face flushing red. Dad, stop it! You're having an episode! Megan, get his pills. Stay back, I commanded. The authority in my voice froze him in place. You want to talk about care? I asked him. You want to talk about how you and your wife have been caring for your mother while I was away? You want to tell these fine people how you earned your inheritance? I looked at Megan. She was pale, clutching her stolen necklace. She knew. In that moment, she knew. You told everyone here that I was abandoning my wife. You told them I was senile. But you didn't tell them what you did for the last 3 days. You didn't tell them about the trip to Miami. Bradley lunged. Give me the remote, I sidestepped him. I was 71, but he was drunk and slow. I didn't invite you here to celebrate my retirement, I said to the crowd. I invited you here to witness a crime. I invited you here because when the police arrive in 5 minutes, I want witnesses. Police, someone whispered. Yes, police, I said. Because what happened in this house was not caregiving. It was torture. And what happened to my bank accounts was not management. It was grand larceny. Bradley was panting, his chest heaving. You're crazy. No one will believe you. You signed the paper. I have the power of attorney. It's legal. I looked at the paper in his hand. Look at the date, Bradley, I said softly. He froze. He looked down at the document. Look at the signature, I said. Look at the spelling. He stared at the paper. His hands began to shake. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse standing upright. You. I didn't sign it, son. I scribbled on it. It's worthless. It has no legal standing. You have no power. You have no authority. And you have no money. I turned to Vargas. He has nothing to pay you with, Mr. Vargas. The house is in a trust. The accounts are frozen. The credit cards are canceled. He is penniless. Vargas stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He looked at Bradley with a look that promised violence. Is this true, kid? Vargas asked. Bradley stammered. No, he's lying. He's senile. Look at the paper. Vargas snatched the paper from Bradley's hand. He looked at the signature. He threw the paper on the floor. You wasted my time, Vargas said. I raised the remote. But that is the least of your problems, Bradley, I said. The money is just money. I can make more money. But what you did to your mother, that is something else entirely. I pointed the remote at the massive screen above the fireplace. You wanted a show? You wanted a party? Let's watch a movie. Dad, don't. Bradley screamed. He tried to rush me again, but 2 of Vargas's men stepped in his way. They weren't protecting me. They were ensuring he didn't leave the room before they got their answers. I pressed the button. The lights in the room dimmed automatically. The screen flared to life. The first image was a timestamp. Monday, 8:00 a.m. The room went silent. The video began to play. And the sound of my son laughing as he taped over a security camera filled the room, echoing off the walls of the house he thought he owned. The video on the screen was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. It played at a volume that made the crystal glasses on the shelves vibrate. The guests watched in a silence so profound, it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. On the screen, my son stood on a chair. He was laughing. He held a roll of black electrical tape. That should do it, he said on the recording. If she dies, she dies. At least we will have a tan for the funeral. In the living room, the real Bradley made a sound like a wounded animal. He lunged for the television, trying to cover the screen with his body, as if his physical presence could block the truth. But the screen was too big, and he was too small. Turn it off, he screamed. It is fake. He used AI. He manipulated it. I did not touch the remote. I let the video play. The scene cut to Megan. She was holding a water bottle in front of Catherine's face. Catherine's hand flailed weakly, trying to grab it. Megan pulled it back, giggling. "Say, please," Megan said on the screen. "Say, please, you useless old witch." Then she poured the water onto the floor. A collective gasp went through the room. Even the loan sharks, men who made their living breaking bones, looked away. There is a code even among thieves, and torturing a paralyzed mother violated it. Vargas turned slowly to look at Megan. She was standing by the fireplace, her face the color of ash. She tried to cover the diamond necklace with her hand, as if hiding the jewels would hide her guilt. I stepped forward. "That video was taken 3 days ago," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "While you were in Miami spending my money, your mother was drinking her own sweat to survive." Bradley turned to me. His eyes were wild. He looked at Vargas, then at me. "It doesn't matter," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "It doesn't matter what you show them. I have the power of attorney. I signed it today. The house is mine. The money is mine. You can't stop the deal, Dad. It is legal." He pulled the document from his pocket again, waving it at Vargas. "Mr. Vargas, look. It is signed." He signed it. "We have a deal. The equity is yours. Just give me the bridge loan." Vargas looked at the paper, then he looked at me. He was doing the math. He didn't care about the morality of the video, but he cared about the stability of his investment. A man who tortured his mother was a man who would cheat his lender. I turned to the front door. Leonard now. Leonard Katz stepped out of the shadows of the hallway where he had been waiting. He walked into the light, carrying a leather portfolio. He didn't look like a party guest. He looked like an undertaker. He walked to the center of the room and placed the portfolio on the coffee table. He opened it. "I am Leonard Katz, Mr. Thompson's attorney," he announced. "And I am here to correct a significant misunderstanding regarding the ownership of this property." Bradley laughed nervously. "Who cares who you are? My dad signed the transfer. It is done." Leonard looked at Bradley over the rim of his glasses. "Your father signed a piece of paper, Bradley, but he cannot give you what he does not have." "What are you talking about?" Bradley snapped. "He owns everything." "Incorrect," Leonard said. 5 years ago, when Gerald retired, he placed all of his assets, including this house, his investment accounts, and his life insurance policies, into an irrevocable trust. The room went quiet again. The word irrevocable hung in the air. Bradley blinked. "A trust, so what? I am the heir. I am the beneficiary. The trust passes to me if he is incapacitated. And he is incapacitated. Look at him." Leonard pulled a document from the portfolio. He held it up. "This is the trust deed. It has a specific clause. Clause 14b, the Morality and Competence Clause. It states that if any beneficiary is found to have engaged in criminal activity, specifically abuse, neglect, or fraud against the grantor, or if they are found to have debts related to gambling or illegal activities, they are automatically and permanently disinherited." Bradley froze. "Disinherited," he whispered. Leonard nodded. "The moment you taped over that camera, Bradley, you triggered the clause. The moment you forged your father's signature on the catering check, you triggered the clause. The moment you took a loan from a criminal enterprise, you triggered the clause." Leonard turned to the room, addressing the guests, and specifically Mr. Vargas. "As of Monday morning, the sole beneficiary of the Thompson estate is the veterans of foreign wars. Bradley Thompson owns nothing. He has no title to this house. He has no access to the accounts. He has no authority to sign loans, liens, or mortgages." Leonard looked at the paper in Bradley's hand. "And that power of attorney document. Even if the signature were valid, which it isn't, it would be useless. You cannot have power of attorney over assets you do not own. Gerald Thompson is a tenant in this house. The trust owns the bricks, and the trust has just evicted you." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. Bradley looked at the paper in his hand. He looked at the house around him. The house he had already sold in his mind. The house he had promised to Vargas as collateral for $100,000 of gambling debt, plus interest. He looked at me. "Dad," he pleaded, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "You can't do this. You can't leave me with nothing." "I didn't do this, Bradley," I said coldly. "You did. You bet against the wrong man." I turned to Vargas. "Mr. Vargas, I believe this concludes your business with my son. He has no collateral. He has no assets. He has no inheritance. He is unemployed. And as of this moment, he is homeless." Vargas stood up slowly. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at Bradley. The look was not angry. It was disappointed. It was the look a butcher gives a piece of meat that has spoiled. "You told me you owned the house, kid," Vargas said, his voice low and gravelly. "You told me the old man was a vegetable. You told me the money was guaranteed." Bradley backed away, knocking over a vase. It shattered. "Mr. Vargas, please, listen. We can work this out. I have jewelry. Megan has jewelry." Megan clutched her necklace. "No," she screamed. "This is mine." Vargas ignored her. He stepped closer to Bradley. "You borrowed 50 grand for the tables. You borrowed another 50 for the lifestyle. With the juice, you owe me $140,000. Tonight." "I don't have it," Bradley sobbed. Vargas looked around the room. He looked at his men. "He lied to us, boys. He wasted our time. He tried to pay us with a house he doesn't own." Vargas turned back to me. He nodded respectfully. "Mr. Thompson, how so? I apologize for the intrusion. We were misled. We will be leaving now." He gestured to his men. "But we are taking him with us. We need to have a conversation about payment plans." Two of the men in suits stepped forward. They grabbed Bradley by the arms. "No!" Bradley shrieked, kicking his legs. "Dad, help me. They're going to kill me, Dad. Please, I'm your son." I watched them drag him toward the door. I watched his heels drag across the marble floor he thought was his. I watched Megan try to run out the back door, only to be blocked by another one of Vargas's men, who gently but firmly relieved her of the diamond necklace. "Interest," Vargas said, pocketing the diamonds. Bradley screamed again. "Dad." I looked him in the eye. "You are not my son," I said. "My son would never let his mother die of thirst. You are just a stranger who broke into my house." Vargas stopped at the door. "Do you want to call the police, Mr. Thompson?" he asked. I looked at my watch. "The police are already here," I said. As if on cue, the sirens erupted outside. Blue and red lights flooded the living room, washing over the faces of the terrified guests. Vargas cursed. He shoved Bradley toward the door. "Let's go," he hissed. But it was too late. The front door burst open. Chief Reynolds walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed officers. They had their weapons drawn. "Nobody move!" Reynolds shouted. Vargas raised his hands. His men did the same. They knew the game. They knew when they were beaten. But Bradley didn't. In his panic, in his absolute terror of Vargas and the police, he made one last fatal mistake. He broke free from the grip of the loan shark's men and tried to run toward me. I don't know if he wanted to beg or if he wanted to hurt me. I don't know if he wanted to take me hostage. His eyes were wide and white. He reached into his jacket pocket, perhaps for his phone, perhaps for the fake legal document. "Police, drop it." Bradley didn't stop. He lunged. An officer tackled him mid-stride. They hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud. Bradley's face smashed into the tiles. He screamed as they wrenched his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. I stood over him. He was bleeding from his nose. He was crying. Snot and tears ran down his face, mixing with the blood. "It's over, Bradley," I said. Leonard walked over and stood beside me. "We have the recording of the assault," Reynolds said, looking at the video still frozen on the screen. "We have the financial records. We have the testimony of the doctor." He looked down at Bradley. "Bradley Thompson, you are under arrest for the aggravated abuse of an elderly person, grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy." Megan began to scream as an officer handcuffed her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. "You planned this," she shrieked. "You sick old man! You set us up! I didn't say a word! I simply turned my back on them." I looked at the screen where the video of my wife had played. I picked up the remote and turned it off. The room went dark again, lit only by the flashing police lights. "Get them out of my house," I said. The officers dragged them away. I listened to Bradley's screams fade into the night. I listened to the sound of the squad car doors slamming shut. The guests began to filter out silently, terrified, keeping their heads down. Vargas nodded to me one last time before being escorted out by Reynolds. He wouldn't go to jail tonight. He was smart. But Bradley was never coming back. I was alone in the living room. The party was over. The house was a wreck. But the air felt cleaner. I walked to the window and looked out. I saw the police cars driving away. I saw my son looking out the back window of the cruiser, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes locking with mine for one last second. I closed the curtains. I turned to Leonard. "Is Catherine safe?" I asked. "She is at the private facility," Leonard said. "The best suite. They are stabilizing her. She is asking for you." I nodded. "Let's go," I said. "I have a wife to take care of." I walked out of the house, leaving the lights on, leaving the mess, leaving the past. I didn't lock the door. There was nothing left in there worth stealing. The chaos that followed was swift and brutal. It was not the chaotic energy of a party, but the structured violence of the law. Chief Reynolds did not need to shout. His officers moved with the efficiency of a team that had seen the worst of humanity and knew exactly how to handle it. They hauled Bradley up from the floor. Blood dripped from his nose onto his rented tuxedo. He wasn't fighting anymore. The fight had left him the moment he realized his inheritance was a myth. He was limp, a dead weight, sobbing with the undignified gasps of a child who has realized the timeout is permanent. Megan was less compliant. As an officer clicked the handcuffs around her wrists, she began to shriek. It was a high, piercing sound that shattered the last remnants of the jazz music. She thrashed her heels, slipping on the marble floor. "It wasn't me," she screamed, her eyes wild, darting around the room for an ally that didn't exist. "Bradley made me do it. He said we had to. He said Gerald was going to die anyway. I'm a nurse. I was just following orders." I watched her. I watched the woman who had poured water onto the floor in front of my dying wife. I watched her try to trade her husband's freedom for her own. It was pathetic. It was exactly what I expected. I walked over to where they were holding her. I stood just out of reach of her kicking legs. "You aren't a nurse, Megan," I said, my voice cutting through her screams. "You are an inmate. And where you are going, they don't wear designer dresses." She spat at me. It landed on my shoe. I didn't flinch. I simply turned away. "Get them out of here," Reynolds ordered. The officers dragged them toward the front door. The guests, the loan sharks, the enablers, they parted like the Red Sea. No one said a word. No one tried to help. Mr. Vargas stood by the door watching the procession. As Bradley was dragged past him, weeping and begging for a second chance, Vargas didn't even blink. He looked at me. He gave me a single short nod. It wasn't a nod of friendship. It was a nod of recognition. Game recognized game. Then he turned and walked out into the night, vanishing before the police could ask him for ID. He knew the debt was uncollectible. He cut his losses. Bradley wouldn't be so lucky. I followed the police out onto the porch. The humid Florida air felt different now. It felt cleaner. The flashing blue and red lights illuminated the neighborhood. Neighbors were coming out onto their lawns watching the spectacle. They saw the golden sun being shoved into the back of a squad car. They saw the perfect daughter-in-law screaming profanities as she was forced into another. Bradley pressed his face against the window of the cruiser. His breath fogged the glass. He was mouthing one word over and over again. Dad. 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 I looked at him. I looked at the face of the man who had taped over a security camera so he wouldn't have to watch his mother die. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I deleted his contact. Then I turned my back on the flashing lights. I walked back into my house and closed the door. The silence that rushed in to fill the space was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a job finished. 6 months later, the ocean breeze is cool against my face. I am sitting on a wooden bench overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. The sun is setting, painting the water in shades of purple and gold. Beside me, in a customized wheelchair that cost more than Bradley's car, sits Catherine. She is different now. The recovery has been slow. She still cannot speak much, just a few words here and there. But her eyes are bright. The fear is gone. Her skin is hydrated and healthy. Her hair is silver and brushed to a shine. I reach out and take her hand. Her grip is stronger today. We have a new routine, Catherine and I. We live in a suite at the Seaside Recovery Center. It is the best facility in the state. I sold the house. I sold the furniture. I liquidated everything that had a memory of Bradley attached to it. I didn't want the ghosts. We spend our mornings in therapy and our evenings here watching the waves. The legal battle was short. Faced with the video evidence and the financial audit, Bradley's public defender advised him to plead guilty. He got 15 years for aggravated elder abuse, grand larceny, and fraud. Megan got 10. They are in different prisons. They will never see each other again. I didn't go to the sentencing. Leonard went. He told me Bradley cried when the judge read the verdict. He told me Bradley asked if his father was in the courtroom. Leonard told him the truth. He said Mr. Thompson has no children. I look at Catherine. She turns her head and smiles at me. It is a crooked smile, the stroke took half of it, but it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Water, she whispers. I pick up the bottle of sparkling water from the bench. I pour it into a crystal glass with a straw. I hold it to her lips. Drink, my love, I say. Take your time. We have all the water in the world. She drinks. She swallows. She sighs with contentment. I lean back and close my eyes. I am 72 years old. I have lost a son. I have lost a fortune in legal fees. I have lost the home I built. But I saved the only thing that mattered. I open my eyes and look at the camera. If you are watching this, if you have parents who are getting older, or if you are getting older yourself, listen to me. Trust is good. Love is beautiful. But control is essential. Never give away your power until you are ready to close your eyes for the last time. Because the people who claim to love you the most are often the ones measuring you for a coffin. I am Gerald Thompson. I am a husband. I am a protector. And I am finally at peace. If this story made you want to call your parents, or maybe change your will, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven him? Because I never will. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about money or law. It was about the nature of blood. We spend our lives building safety nets for our children, believing that when we fall, they will be there to catch us. But I discovered that sometimes the hands reaching out aren't there to help you up. They are there to pick your pockets. Blind trust is a liability even within your own home. Real love protects. It never exploits. Do not feel guilty for guarding your dignity, your assets, or your well-being. The strongest fortress you can build is one where you hold the only key. Never apologize for surviving the people who tried to break you. If this story reminded you that you need to protect your own future, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Bradley, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I'll see you in the next story.